Good morning and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity from the Maine Department of Education. My name is Joe Schmidt and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the department. Today I'm very excited to welcome a wonderful trio from Georgia. Jennifer Zumbris, Joanne Wood, and Joy Hatcher will be with us today, tomorrow, and Thursday as part of a series. Today's series, Joanne's going to be looking more about upper elementary 3-5, maybe a little bit of middle school application with that. Tomorrow, Jennifer's going to be talking about K2, and Joy will come in on Thursday and talk about kind of 6-12 and more of that secondary emphasis. As I mentioned to the group before hitting record, Georgia has a wonderful program where they actually bring teachers and authors together to talk about literacy and disciplinary literacy. And I'm very happy and proud to not only call them colleagues and friends, because you're going to learn about some of the best when it comes to reading in the social studies classroom. So with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues from the Georgia Department of Education and Joanne Wood leading the way today.
Okay, hi everybody, and thank you for taking the time. We're doing a session, of course, on read alouds, which is one of my favorite topics of all. Jennifer, Joy, and I are all big fans. We do whatever we can to promote that because we think read alouds in social studies and inquiry all make a beautiful marriage. So I have a hook posted about sharing your favorite read aloud. Jennifer and Joy, do we have any responses that you want to share with me?
We actually have a lot of responses, a lot of comments about Charlotte's Web. I know one of your favorites.
Yep.
Brown Bear, people being read to by their teachers at school and enjoying that.
I see Junie B. Jones and Spiderwick Chronicles.
Okay.
Yes, Mrs. Rumphius, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. That was always one of our favorite beginning of the year read alouds.
Yep, love those books. Did anyone talk about what makes it stick in their memory?
A couple of people said everything that their parent read to them or that their teacher read to them.
So a lot of times it's who's reading to you and what's being read. You have that common bond, that common memory. Okay, well, I'm going to keep moving, but if at any time you think of one you want to share, Jennifer and Joy will jump in and share with me. So great. The point of this exercise is just to remind you that read alouds is not wasted time. Read alouds actually creates memories that last the rest of your life and actually do create that common bond. And the importance, I'm glad someone said, it reminds me of my parents. I can hear my parents reading to me. That's important for them, your students, to hear you reading. I know there are lots and lots of programs out there and YouTube videos and all kinds of things that kids can click and listen to someone read. Nothing means more as from a teacher's perspective than them hearing you read aloud. So I hope that that's one of the tips for reading aloud that I've learned from some of my mentors in the reading aloud world. So again, let me move forward here. Here we go. All right, so we've called this Getting More Bang for Your Book, Read Alouds in Elementary Social Studies Inquiry. I put my email address on this slide, and also it'll be again at the end, because I want you to get in touch if you have other books to share that you didn't think of during this session, or have questions about books on specific topics. We know that I work at the Georgia Department of Ed, of course, as Joe said, and our standards don't align exactly with yours, but many of the topics are going to be similar, and we also teach, K-12, so many of the topics that we don't address today with some of the read aloud titles that I share, we have many more resources. So if you want to continue that conversation, I hope you'll be in touch. And as Joe said, I'm joined by Jennifer and Joy. Y'all want to say hi?
You first.
Hey, I'm Jennifer Zumbris. I'm the Content Integration Specialist.
I'm Joy Hatcher. I'm the Program Manager.
And together we make up the dynamic trio, I guess, of the 3 J's we sometimes call ourselves. Just a little bit of background about me, because I always wanted to know who was talking to me when I went to sessions throughout my career. I taught in the classroom for 25 years. I taught 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grades and loved it. and only left it to become our elementary social studies supervisor in my local district in Cobb County, Georgia. Did that for 8.5 years, and I learned a lot from teachers. I learned many, many things from students all those years, and then a lot from teachers since then. And after I retired from Cobb County, I then started back to work a couple of years later at the Department of Ed. So I've been working with Joy, and then more recently with Jennifer for the past 3.5 years. So that's been a very rewarding experience. One of the reasons that keeps me going is that I continue to learn about new titles. So I'm going to share some of those titles with you today. So at any time, if you have a question or comment, if you type it in the chat, Joy and Jennifer are good at interrupting me, and they will, and they'll let me know when you have a question or want to interact, because I do want this to be more interactive. Okay, think about this quote and tell me if you agree with this or not. Maybe chat in the chat, or what it means to you. Any responses?
I don't see any yet.
Okay,
I'm sure people are still typing.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll give you wait time.
Steph says she agrees, and she feels like her third graders love history because they understand it as a story.
Mm-hmm.
And then lots of agrees. Tammy, I hope I'm saying this right, Cassie, Crystal, Gina.
Okay. Well, when I saw the quote, it just captured the whole reason I like history is because of the story in it. When I first started teaching, social studies was my least favorite subject, and I learned it through the years, a chapter ahead of my kids, and I fell in love with particularly U.S. history, but fell in love with history because of the stories. And to me, that's what helps create this beautiful marriage between social studies and read aloud. So,
Joanne, I wanted to share a couple more.
Okay.
Michelle says, my own kids ask me to tell our family stories all the time, even at 16 years old.
I love that.
Josh says, stories allow you to place the story in your mind with vital details.
Love it.
And then Sheila says, I shouldn't scroll while I'm trying to read. When I present to students, they're always receptive to the stories I add in.
Always. And that's what grabbed me when I saw how my students responded, and when they learned some content. Many of the subjects we teach them skills to address any content, but they don't really have to master any content. And when my kids started learning these stories from history, that's what they remembered to go home and tell their parents they learned. So that story is what really grabs you. All right. One of the things we do is share a lot on our social media. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to note that we'd love for you to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Joy is our guru and posts almost every day. And many of the opportunities she shares and resources she shares are not restricted to Georgia. So they'd be perfectly lovely for you as well. Our Instagram account is a teacher takeover account. So it's on vacation right now for the summer. But that will gear up again in the fall. I use it to steal great ideas. So that might be a resource for you as well. So I want to make sure you know that. We're kind of going to go through peeling back an inquiry-based, read aloud centered lesson, finding new titles, read aloud tips, and then we'll do a kind of a little closing. So that's our overall agenda. One of the things we have done in Georgia is focus on inquiry, as everyone around the country has with social studies, not just the same old your mama's old social studies. We've kind of switched that over to an inquiry-driven social studies. And the C3 framework this is aligned with the C3 framework. It's a kind of a visual document we prepared so that principals who are in classrooms were asking us, what do I need to look for when I'm looking for an inquiry social studies lesson? And this is the sheet we gave them. And I've actually sent this handout to Joe so he can post that along with this PowerPoint. The reason that I'm using it today is just to give us something to look for in my conversation about mentor texts in a few minutes. I want you to look for whether you see an essential or a compelling question, whether you see evidence, or would see students speaking, writing, illustrating, reading, and listening, what we've reduced to the acronym SWIRL. Whether you see source analysis or opportunities for source analysis, opportunities for debate or discussion or engagement or action, and then using historical thinking. And when we say historical thinking, we're, of course, we don't just look at historical thinking, but also geospatial reasoning, economic thinking, and thinking like a political scientist. So we want all the domains. We want our students to be thinking in all those ways. And I know you guys are working on all of these things. I've looked at some of your other presentations and seen that you're covering these same topics. So real quick, why we want to use read alouds, some read aloud tips, and building your own read aloud list. That's what I always go to sessions for. Tell me about some new books. So I'm hoping that some of these titles will be new to you. And then also, if you have particular go-to titles that you love in social studies, there are a couple of ways you can share those among yourselves and with us. One is to type them in the chat. And also, Jennifer has created a Google Doc, and you can, she'll put the link in the chat, right, Jennifer?
I already have it in there. It's in there ready to go.
Great. And then you can click on that and add your own titles to it, so that when we get through, we've built a joint list together that we can share. I think that's a wonderful idea. And again, why I like to have sessions and go to sessions, continue learning, is to continue learning new books and finding out what I can do with them. So, so very quickly, some read aloud tips. I've kind of boiled these down. I'm going to talk about it more again at the end of our time, but very quickly, when you introduce a new book, these are ideas that have worked for me. I pulled these from my friend Lester Laminack, who's a kind of a read aloud mentor to me. Ideas for launching a book successfully, doing a picture walk, doing a book talk, an author profile, a book trailer, a theme or topic link, or just start reading. Any of those work. Some other tips that he likes to share: pick a variety of kinds of books to help your students listen up. And listen up meaning go beyond what they would read on their own. You want to have them grow as they read. And one way to do that is pick books slightly above, or maybe well below, above what they would normally read. I love this idea of asking students to stop at different points while you're reading aloud, and just ask them, what are you picturing in your mind? What movie is going on in your mind at this point? I think it's a good way to keep kids actively listening. Think about the end of the read aloud. What will you do at the end of the read aloud? And think about how you'll use the read aloud in multiple ways. That's the part I think some of us miss. We read a book, it's one and done. And there are so many ways to go back and layer in more learning from a particular title. So we'll talk about that in relation to some particular titles. If you're interested in finding out more about read alouds, background, there's a lot of things, resources out there. These are some of my favorites. Stephen Lane and Lester Laminack, of course, folks who've done a lot of work with read alouds. They do them across the curriculum. I hone in on the parts that talk about social studies in particular, but they're all really useful resources on my PD shelf. So I'm going to share a spotlight book. It's actually a pair of books. And as you listen, I want you to think about, what social studies tasks could you build on this book? What literacy tasks could you build on? What map and globe and information processing skills could you reinforce? When you might use it, and how you might use it to promote historical thinking, and other ideas that you might have. So I hope that you're actively listening and brainstorming some things. Usually, of course, face-to-face, I'm in a room and I bring a lot of books, and I read aloud a book and model that, and then we talk about that together, and then I let everybody tear into the books and we read those books. We have to modify that a little bit for our setting today, but hopefully I want you to stay engaged as much as you can, and that chat feature is where you can really do that. So we're going to talk about two books paired and the reason I picked these, but it was really hard to narrow down to two, because I love so many, hundreds and hundreds of books. These are two that particularly suit Memorial Day, which of course is Monday. So that's why I picked these two. One is Maya Lin. It's a biography of the artist architect of the Vietnam Wall Memorial. And then another is Rolling Thunder, which is by Kate Mesner, which also has a tie to that. And you'll kind of see more about that in a moment. So I'm going to talk about each of those books and how I would use them in the classroom. Normally, this is the part where I would read the book aloud. I'm actually not going to do that today because of we have some limited time, but I'm going to try to give you at least a flavor of the book so that you can hunt up the book and read it yourself. I hope you'll enjoy those. So how would I introduce the Maya Lin book? I would try to have them consider questions like this. How do we remember important events or people in our lives? So remembering is important. What do we mean by remember? What are memorials? So I'd move from the word remember, which I think kids would know, to memorials, which they may or may not know. And then I would ask them, what are some memorials we have in our neighborhood or our community, our town, our state, or our country? And see what they already know, what kind of knowledge they bring about that. And then I would launch into the Maya Lin book. And as I said, it's a biography, so it talks about her childhood and how she was interested in expressing her ideas artistically, her particular philosophy of art. One of the things that I want to point out with almost every book that I'm sharing today is the author's note and the end notes, the illustrator notes in the backs of books now. They're better than they've ever been before. They provide so many jumping off points for things. I would pull text from this author's note and have my students consider that, have them think about what they're doing now that might be preparing them for what they want to do later, just as Maya did in her childhood. One of the things I appreciated about this author's note, if you look around the borders, you see the illustrator has included all the tools of an artist. So then you might extend off of that and talk about what are the tools of other activities that we do, and what particular tools do you feel like you're best at using. You'll also notice some links here to Maya Lin's page, which is very interesting, and you can see some of her other work through her life, and then to two links to the Vietnam Memorial Wall, which are both very powerful as well. So are there any ideas that you participants have put into the chat, Jennifer and Joy? I don't want to just talk and talk without listening.
Well, I'm not sure that they understand that they can put things in the chat. So I've kind of placed it several times in the chat, and I'll put it there again. If you click on the link to the Google Doc, you can type in books that you use in your classroom for social studies that you think are great. And then there's a section in there about how to use it. Some of the ones in there are all the way to the top, which is a book about the little girl who was helping protest for the Americans with Disabilities Act, and she actually climbed up the stairs. So it's a great one to use with primary sources because you actually can see the pictures and the video footage of her climbing up the stairs. That's a great one also talking about civic action.
Joanne, are you asking if they've put in the chat what they think they can do with this book?
I think we're open to lots of things. I love it if we have a conversation as we're rolling along about the book we're talking about. And then I also think I want to hear about other books that you use in a variety of ways, like Jennifer suggested as well.
So Cindy said, what about this particular book, what determines what we choose to remember and what we don't? And then if and how it relates to our own lives.
That's great. Those are great questions. Things that make it come alive and that give some meaning to kids. Why are we even learning about this? Why does it matter to me? And how can I take what I'm learning from this and make sense of it in my own life? I think those are great questions. Thank you. And so continue to share as we go. And I know Joy and Jennifer will let me know. Okay. Some other places where you can find some backup resources for this particular title, the title on Maya Lin. I find this a newsletter from the American Association of School Librarians to be really useful. It's something I recently discovered. I didn't know about it before, but there are actually all kinds of ideas for teaching different kinds of books. This particular issue focuses on the Maya Lin book, and it includes links to books, linking that book to primary sources. So you can, they include links in the article that take you to a site that includes items and letters that have been left at the Vietnam Memorial. So you have primary sources right there for your kids. They can click and link to those. There are also primary sources connected that talk about the design contest for the wall. And in the book, you find out how Maya Lin participated in that design contest, and people couldn't believe that she was so young and it was her first main project. It was a school project she did in college that won this design contest. And then there are tips for conducting discussions about how and why we memorialize people in events. So that's a rich resource that I hope you'll find helpful. Another resource I found at Scholastic is relates to drawing. And so for your students who understand things and process things through creating and designing things, this is a perfect connection to designing because we're talking about a designer, an artist, and architect. And there's a nice drawing activity connected to this book at the Scholastic site. Do we have any other comments on that book?
I don't see any specific to the book. Someone, Tammy mentioned that you could use this as a resource for students with drawing. Yeah. And then we've had several people asking about whether or not they're going to have access to these resources after the session today. And you have a beautiful resource document set to share with everybody. So don't panic. Joanne has all this saved for you. So don't write frantically and miss out on something.
Yes, and where Joe posts the recording of this video, I've already sent to him the PowerPoint that I'm doing, and I've also sent a handout with all of these book titles listed. So I hope that you'll find that useful, because I know if you're frantically writing, I probably should have said that at the beginning, but I'm glad you asked the question now. So thank you, Jennifer. All right, so I paired the book Maya Lin with Rolling Thunder. And again, I would return to some of the same questions, maybe not all of the same questions, but some of them. How do we remember important events or people in our lives? What is a veteran? How and why do we remember veterans? And what does it mean to honor someone? How does this book connect to the book about Maya Lin? I'm actually going to read to you a short excerpt. Normally, of course, I'd be reading with a document camera and showing you the pages. I'm going to start on the page that has the cover illustration because you can see that on my slide. You can see they're in some kind of a parade. I might ask students to tell what they see on the cover illustration. When you get to the part of the story that covers this, I'm just going to read a couple of pages to show you where they're headed. And this book is by Kate Mesner, by the way. Motors growling, roaring near, crowds that cry and wave and cheer, raising flags of black, white, and black for those who never made it back. For soldiers lost in other days, POWs, MIAs. For soldiers serving still today, missing families far away, rolling, slowing to a crawl, stopping, there it is, the wall. Polished marble, stark and bare, touch a name and say a prayer. And the book goes on for a couple more pages. It's a very powerful book, very simple book. Any age student could get an important message from it, and I think it will lead to great discussion. So I've only teased you with a little excerpt, but I hope you'll follow up and get a hold of the book and read it yourself. Here are some ideas for teaching literacy and social studies through the book Rolling Thunder. And I actually borrowed these ideas from Kim Heckart, who is a third grade teacher in Iowa. I heard her share this lesson plan at our National Council for Social Studies conference a couple of years ago, which is when I fell in love with the book. So I hope that you'll fall in love with the book and maybe you'll find these ideas helpful. I actually do have Kim's lesson plan, and she's agreed that absolutely she's happy to share it. So if you want a copy, I did not include a copy of her lesson plan because it might not be something you're going to use. But if you do use it and want that plan, all you have to do is shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. And as you can see, she's shared ideas for having kids watch some videos. There are some Rolling Thunder videos, a saluting soldier video. Each year at that Rolling Thunder parade on Memorial Day, they have a soldier who shows up and salutes from the beginning of the parade to the end. And one year he got married, and he and his wife stood out there in her wedding dress, and they both saluted through the entire parade. It's very, very moving to watch. I can't watch any of these things without crying, but to me, that means they're having an impact. So they can watch one of the videos and then do a video analysis of it. They can do some photo and map analysis of memorials or of veterans events, or you can download a map of the parade route, and they can, I think you guys say route, not route, up there in Maine, but then you can have them work with the map. There are writing connections you can make. You can have them write a narrative piece on remembering and honoring others, write a thank you letter. Many of you probably do these kinds of things at Memorial Day or Veterans Day. You can also connect it to a couple of other picture books. The Wall by Eve Bunting is about the Vietnam Memorial. The Poppy Lady is an earlier book about a Georgia woman who helped start the tradition of wearing red poppies to remember our lost soldiers. So those are other connections. And then there are arts connections of drawing, making a song, doing a skit or a dramatization. There are all kinds of ways to incorporate the arts into these books as well. So I'm going to pause for breath and to see if we have any comments.
We actually had, sorry, Joy, I didn't know you were
ahead. Go ahead, Jennifer.
We had several people comment things. They were talking about how Shannon says she teaches third grade and they focus a lot on their community and memorials in their community, but they could tie those in with what you just shared.
Good.
And then Joe talked about having students thinking about a memorial, a statue, etc., what they should say about a person or event and what the design should look like. And that's a great way to integrate social studies and art.
Yep.
Cynthia says in third grade they take their students to Memorial Park and to a Revolutionary War veterans grave, and they could write about the people for their community project, so it would tie in as well. And then you're going to be super jealous here. Joe says Kim Heckert will be joining them on May 26th at 10:30 to talk, 9:30 to talk about questions and inquiry with elementary students.
Well, she's awesome. Everything she does is wonderful. So you're in for a treat.
Yes. Leslie talks about pairing the biography on a female and then a motorcycle themed cover, how that would kind of meet her kids well with gender, and how many students, motorcycle, sorry, I'm trying to read it quickly, how they could go through and talk about Rolling Thunder wearing camo, how that would appeal to students.
I love that. I didn't think about the gender balance there, but that was nicely done, wasn't it?
Yes, very well done.
Okay, well, great. Thank you for that discussion. Okay, let me find I've lost there we go. I just want to show you very quickly, there is a Rolling Thunder site. Now, right after I fell in love with this book, they stopped doing the parade. I think they didn't do one last year in 2019. And when I went to the website again to make sure the website was still valid, it said they were resuming it. Now, I don't know if they're actually going to do that this year because so many things are not live, but apparently someone is interested in keeping that thing going. And it's been going for a long, long time. So check it out. And if there isn't a live one this year, I hope you'll watch a video of an older one because it's equally as moving, whether it's live or not. So you can find information there. Now, I wanted to stop for a moment and just talk about some where to find great titles, especially for social studies. The first link that I would share with you is to the Notable Trade Books and Social Studies site at NCSS. A new list comes out every year. If you're not aware of this, you need to be, and I hope you're a member of NCSS, because then you'll get the list in the mail in this nice little brochure that you see over on the right. I can't wait. Actually, they come out in May or June, the May-June issue. So I can't wait for my issue to come with this year's list. I haven't seen it yet. If you are wanting to access the previous year's lists, though, you can get them. You can download them all free as PDFs by going to the site. If you're a member, you can download all of them, including the most recent list. If you're not a member, you can download all but the latest year, and the latest year they reserve for people who are members. So, so there's one benefit of membership right there. Another award-winning list that is on the same site at NCSS is the Carter Woodson Award winners. Those are books that represent marginalized communities that haven't been as visible in kids' books. So they try purposely to award to give that Carter Woodson Award to books that kind of fill a gap that we need and that students need to see. And then the third is our own Georgia Council for Social Studies website. I know that our children's literature, we have children's literature tied to every grade and course in social studies posted on this webpage. And I know that all of our standards will not align up. You probably teach different things at different grades than we do, but many, many, many of our topics I'm sure you cover, and concepts I'm sure you cover. And I think you would find those sites useful, those lists useful, even though they might not align one-to-one with your grade levels. So I hope you'll check those out and look for new titles. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the Blitzkrieg portion of our session and share some titles. I picked 10 that I just jumped all over the place and tried to pick titles. I'm not going to share fully fleshed out lesson idea pages or anything like that. I'm just going to give you a thumbnail for each one and race through that. So again, this is the part where I would have had you picking the book and reading it yourself. And because of the way we're doing this, we can't do that this time. So I hope you'll indulge me as I share some really favorite titles. And I'm kind of trying to hit the different domains in social studies. So Joy and Jennifer, I know you're going to jump in if you need to, right? Yep. Okay, well, for my first book, this is a book that Joy particularly loves too. In fact, I think she has a copy. This is a book I shared last fall. It had just come out. It's called We Are Grateful, Otsali Heliga, which is by Tracy Sorrell. And a lovely book. You can use it with any age student. It focuses on a Cherokee tradition of showing gratitude and how they show gratitude throughout their lives. So I tied it to Thanksgiving. You could tie it to any kind of harvest festival, gratitude festival, anytime you wanted your students to work on ways to show gratitude. It's a lovely book. And I know that you guys, according to your standards that Joe shared with us, you really emphasize your Native American cultures, particularly the tribes that are located where Maine is located now. We also do the same. And this makes a lovely counterpoint to compare and contrast the tribes that are native to your part of the country with tribes that are native to other parts of the country. So this is just one of many titles that I like to share for to focus on American Indian traditions. The other thing that I think this book does that's really important is showing that American Indians, we have changed our terminology to American Indians now rather than Native Americans, but whatever term you're using, that they are alive today, because so often we teach about Native cultures as if they're only in the past. And this one is actually about present day Cherokee customs. Another book I love, All Different Now. I've actually done a lesson plan on this as well. It lends itself to so many wonderful connections with literacy. And it also actually ties in nicely with right now. This book is about Juneteenth, the beginnings of Juneteenth. So it's set in kind of a reconstruction. It's set right after the Civil War has ended. If you don't know the book, it's about a group of enslaved people who in mid-June of 1865, they discover that they hear about the Emancipation Proclamation. They hear about the end of the war for the first time. And from one day to the next, they were enslaved and they're free. So that's what the title relates to, All Different Now. They hear it. They stop working in the fields. They have a great celebration. It's all beautifully illustrated. And then the next day they pack up their wagons and they leave. And you don't know where they're going and what they're doing. So it leaves you with lots of questions. It leaves students with lots of questions and lots of opportunities to write, to research, to connect to even their own lives right now. One of the ways that I've been connecting this book lately is and of course, it's not the same thing. It's a different kind of moment in history, but all of our lives changed in a very short time, just in March. Our lives were one thing one day and another thing the next day, as we all kind of went into distance separation and all of that. So we have something we can make a comparison to where everything changed in a heartbeat, and now we have to kind of figure out what is our new normal. And so do the people in this story. So they really have to a point of relevancy for kids. So I highly encourage you to check out this book. Another book we really love is Molly Bannaky. We love it so much we give this book away sometimes in some of our third grade workshops where we talk about colonial America, the British colonies. We use this book for multiple reasons. It's a historical fiction, but most of it is based on history. I love using historical fiction with my students because to me, it's where you can really get down to the nitty-gritty of how historians work. I have my students decide what do we know is true based on facts that we can back up with evidence. So what historical evidence do we have to support these parts of Molly Bannaky, and what do we think the author has made up to make the fiction part? So a lot of the dialogue they will say is made up, which is true, and a lot of the actual events and the actual person in this story is from history. And the back matter really gives you all of the evidence that you need to be able to have your students analyze this book. So what it does is present the perspective of, we have to teach, our standard says that we teach colonial America from the perspective of lots of different colonial people. So from enslaved people, from the point of view of women, from children, from different people in the three different regions of colonies, and so on. And this book actually captures that experience from several perspectives. So we find that it's a helpful book in many ways. I'm moving right along, but remember, Jennifer and Joy, if you have anything to jump in with, please do. Dazzle Ships is one of our favorites. It is one we use to teach World War I. It's subtitled World War I and the Art of Confusion. It's about camouflage. And I actually was so pleased to find this book because for a long time my bookshelf was hugely filled with books on World War II for using with kids, but it didn't have a lot of great picture books for World War I. And now I've happily, by sharing with other teachers and by stumbling on new books, I've found many more that actually deal with World War I as well. So this is one we just love. We met Chris Barton at our National Social Studies Conference this past year in Austin, Texas, and he's delightful and turning out just some wonderful, wonderful books. This book is beautifully illustrated. It also doesn't just talk about World War I. It talks about how you strategize in a war how you solve a problem with creative thinking. So this dazzle ships idea was a very creative solution to a problem that was happening when the German submarines were torpedoing ships. And they wanted to kind of confuse the submarine captains into thinking that a ship was going one direction when it was really going another, and therefore it would save lives. So it may not have been the best solution, but it was a creative solution. So in the back of the book and near the end of the story, the author talks about how thinking out of the box really helps save lives, and how thinking out of the box is useful anytime. So the back of the book, you can connect this with science. You can connect it with science in the way that we talk about animals camouflage themselves. You can talk about you can make lots and lots of connections across the content areas. So I can't recommend the book highly enough. It's a beautiful book.
Joanne, there are a few comments.
Okay, thank you.
From some of the previous ones as well.
Okay.
We are thankful. Everyone said it would be a good addition to their Native American unit.
Great.
Cynthia says they celebrate Juneteenth in 7th grade, so glad to discover a book about Juneteenth.
Great.
Sherry says E.B. Lewis is awesome. Love his work.
Yep, he certainly is.
Cindy loves the connection to the pandemic experience.
Good.
And Tammy likes the idea of comparing the truth to fiction.
Great. So you're definitely picking up on what I love most about these books. So thank you very much. I'm glad they're going to be of some use to you. My next book is The Undefeated, which is Kwame Alexander and Kadir Nelson, a powerhouse pair if I've ever heard of one. We actually had Kadir Nelson come to our picture book conference last year, our retreat last year, and he's amazing. And this book had just come out right before he came. So my copy is signed by him, which is thrilling to me. If you don't know this book, it's like a primer of Black history or African American history, and beautifully, beautifully illustrated. So it's written in free verse by Kwame Alexander. It's very powerful, and it just talks about the unquenchable spirit of these individuals. In the back of the book, there's a little biographical sketch on each of these famous African Americans. So it's a wonderful book in multiple ways, and to talk about the kind of research that both Kwame Alexander and Kadir Nelson had to do in order to write about all of these different figures in one book, in a picture book that you can read in 10 minutes. It's quite impressive. So I hope that you'll get your hands on this book. Well worth your time. The Great Fuzz Frenzy is a totally different kind of book than the last one. The last one's more sobering and powerful. This one is just fun. And I use it for economics to teach the concept of scarcity. If you don't know this book, it's just so much fun to share with kids and adults. Actually, I've shared it with all different ages. And also, I should stop for a moment and say, I would share these books, every single one of these books, K-12. So it's I've called this elementary, and I'm sharing books I would share with elementary, but I would also share them with other grades too. None of these books is above or below a particular grade level. They can be used across the board. It depends on what you do to introduce and follow up. So The Great Fuzz Frenzy is just about a group of prairie dogs who start fighting over a tennis ball that got dropped into their town, and they start fighting over the fuzz that they pull off of the tennis ball. It becomes a scarce commodity, and you find out what happens when you have a scarce commodity that everybody wants. So they start fighting over it. It starts tearing apart their town. It brings out the worst in some of their prairie dog brothers and sisters. It's just a rollicking fun thing. And so I would use it again as a springboard to talk about scarcity, but first I would just enjoy the heck out of it because it's a great story and kids love it. And then it ends with a kind of teaser. Something else falls into their town, and then you don't know what's going to happen. So you can use it as a great writing launch as well. So
Joanne, we have a couple of comments.
Okay.
Excited about Molly Bannaky.
Good.
Kwame Alexander has a program on NPR creating community poetry.
He's so good. He's just so good. Yeah.
And
Excellent.
I think about this book, The Great Fuzz Frenzy. Steph says she's never used it for social studies, but kids do love it. Several people want to add it to their collection. They say it's a cute book and it uses humor to inspire kids to listen.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think so many of the books that I recommend are really serious. It's nice to have ones that just make you laugh and enjoy, and also see a connection to something that we're learning. So great. Thank you for those comments. All right, this next book is a book that I've only very recently discovered. I love this book. It's a very simple book called Water and Land. It's just about land and water forms around the world. You can use it for any grade level because the creativity in it is what I would want to inspire in my students. And then I can think of so many ways I would have them do an activity based on this. So what you have, I had to show you some inside pages in order for you to get the concept, because this book is actually, the way it's illustrated is very powerful. So on the page to the left, top left, you see lake, and it has a cutout that shows you what a lake is. So a lake is water surrounded by land, right? And then you flip it over, and the next double page spread is island. So using that same cutout, they've shown that an island is like the flip side of a lake. And then you do the same thing with bay and cape. And then they go through other pairings of water and land forms in the book. So you even to fairly complex ones. So you get to systems of lakes, and you get to archipelago, which is not one I ever taught, but I think it's an interesting one. Then Gulf and peninsula and so on. And the end of the book has it's kind of a reference section where it actually defines each of these land and water forms and shows you the shapes of them, the way they've used them in the book. And then it has a fold out cardboard kind of map of the world with examples noted. So I can think of so many ways to build on this. I would have kids locate in Maine or in the Western Hemisphere or in the world examples of all of these different landforms. And I might have them land and water forms, and I might have them actually do something similar with other land and water forms. Can they create their own picture book where they show them visually, which is the creative part of this book, is how they physically illustrated these. So I hope that that's a useful book for you, and a geography kind of title. My Taking Informed Action book is Follow the Moon Home. This is a book that we love to use. We had Deborah Hopkinson at our Picturing History book retreat last year. She wrote this paired up with Philippe Cousteau. And what it's about is, it's about a couple of things. It's about kids taking action to solve a problem. So that's what we want all our kids to do. And so it's a wonderful model of civic action and getting kids civically engaged. And it's also about a real problem, the sea turtles, and how lights draw them away from their nesting grounds and cause them to die, and not be able to lay their eggs. So the class of students in this story actually develop a plan. And I tell teachers, if you get this book and open it up to the page where the teacher is having a discussion with the students about what civic action they're going to take, and he has an anchor chart in his classroom with all the steps of civic action. So just take that and use that in your classroom. You could use it with any topic that you're wanting kids to be engaged in. So it's a wonderful model. So I can see that I'm actually, even though I'm talking frantically, I'm going to run out of time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to zip to through the next few slides. I'm not going to stop for them, but you're going to get all of them in the PowerPoint. I've given you some more tips about read alouds. I've given you research background. I've given you some why should teachers teach. If you Google this, you actually get over 1 million results. So there's lots of justification for read alouds. And I include all this because I'll tell you, one of the most striking moments of my career was when I had a principal come into my room, and I was doing a read aloud with my class. And my principal said, I was coming to do your evaluation observation, but I'll come back when you're teaching. And I almost died because I was so shocked at what came out of her mouth. So I actually finished my read aloud, finished my lesson, got to my specials time, and I went to my principal and said, I just want you to know why I was doing that read aloud, how intentionally I was using that read aloud, how teaching is including read alouds, that it was not a time when I wasn't teaching. And I want you to see what else I was doing with that read aloud. So they never did that again. They never came in my room and said, oh, you're reading aloud. We'll just come back when something good's going on. I had to do it because I think there is this misconception that read aloud is just fun time and not being used. And I think it can be used really, really well. So,
Joanne, Joe says there's a little bit of buffer time if you need to go over.
Oh, okay. That's good because I was about to hyperventilate. But because I always try to share more than I have time for. So the next couple of slides are read aloud guidelines from Lester Laminack. I've already told you that he's a real guru to me. He talks about the different ways we can use them. I won't talk you through this because all of it's there and I'd rather have time to talk with you. So I hope we'll have more comments before we wrap it up. Here are some read alouds from Stephen Lane, who writes the book In Defense of the Read Aloud, and other books as well. But I loved his comments. He tells lots of stories about read alouds in his books, so they're fun to read. And he's very much a K-12 person. Lester is more of an elementary person, but Stephen actually includes read aloud ideas for all grade levels. And again, I've given you more ideas here that you can read on your own, and I'm happy to discuss anytime if you want to email me. I do want to end with two last recommendations. If you were counting, I told you I was going to share 10 more titles, and I only shared 8. So usually when I do a read aloud workshop of any kind, I like to end with a book that doesn't necessarily, I can't necessarily tie this with a specific standard that we teach, because one of the things I truly believe is that we don't just teach standards and skills, we actually teach kids to be better people. So we can't forget that part of our mission as teachers, that we're trying to create good human beings. So I like to end with something that leaves an impression and has kids think about how they treat others. And so 2 books that I love to use, one is Trooper, which I can't read either of them without crying. And actually, I think that's a good thing. I like to cry when I read if it makes me cry, and I like to leave my audience in tears too, because to me it shows a powerful lesson that books actually can make us feel something. So Trooper is about a rescue of a dog. I'm a real dog person, so that appeals to me in multiple ways. Spoiler alert, you find out that Trooper has only 3 legs. He's been left behind every time at the rescue center, and then this boy finds him and does not reject him, takes him home. And it's just an amazing story, really, really powerful. And kids will really relate to this story too. And then Each Kindness is about a little girl who has an opportunity. Another one, by the way, illustrated by E.B. Lewis. Both of these I didn't realize I had 3 E.B. Lewis illustrated books in this set, but that just shows you how great he is. Each Kindness is about a girl who lets an opportunity to be kind go by and is not kind, and her regrets about that. She never has a chance to make it up, but she has regrets and she's learned something from it. So again, I think it's very real about kids who do something pretty hateful and then later have second thoughts about it. So I think it opens up a great conversation for our students. So I'm going to flip to our last slide, which is one where we'd like to have you give us some feedback. So we have a QR code or a link here that you can just take a moment to give us some feedback on today's session. We always collect feedback when we do sessions so that we can get better. But I'd also love to hear from anyone in the chat, any comments, any discussion, any of the books you love, if you haven't shared them in the Google form, which I hope you have, but let's just see.
Someone, let me see. I love each kindness. Cheryl says she reads it several times a year. Sherry says Jacqueline Woodson is such a great author. And there's E. Lewis again.
Yep.
Stephanie says each kindness is wonderful. Everybody loves each kindness.
Oh, I'm so glad, because often when I read that book, I will ask, have you heard of this book? And no one will raise their hand. And that makes me happy and sad. Happy because they'll all know it after this, but sad because I think, how did you not know this book before? So I'm glad to know that you guys are on top of it. So great. And if you tune in tomorrow, I know Jennifer's going to share a lot of titles for teaching kindness. So she's a queen of that, and she actually models that too. She's the kindest person I know. So
several people are glad that you shared your story about the principal. Cynthia says she thought the principal was going to say, I love the book and learned so much, I forgot to write my observation notes.
Yeah, I wish they'd said that. I wish that had been what they said. Yeah, but I think they didn't make that mistake again. So I felt like sometimes education goes both ways. We're not just learning from our bosses, we're teaching our bosses. So right, Joy? Any other feedback?
Could we post the feedback? Jennifer, can you post the feedback link from Joanne's form into the chat box?
Yes, give me just a second and I'll post it.
Yes, we did talk about that because we realized you can't probably take it off the video, off the Zoom screen. But
Cynthia says, thank you. So many great book ideas.
Good.
Crystal said, I can't wait for next webinar from you lovely ladies.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, that's certainly what we'd rather hear than, hey, go away, we never want to see you again. So yay.
And Jennifer's posted that feedback form in the chat.
So you can see it. Perfect.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So we appreciate that feedback because we really do take it seriously, and we like to have a chance for you to say what you thought, and even what you would want if you were doing part 2, what you would want. That's always a good question. So
Tammy says it was so much fun that she enjoyed it. Jessica says thank you so much.
Thank you.
So just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because I know we've got a large contingency from RSU 64 who might be here for the first time. If you're looking for the contact our certificate from me, make sure that you are clicking on the form that I am using. If you want to specifically give Joanne, Joy, Jennifer feedback on this session, you would have their link. So there are the 2 separate forms. Yeah. And while we still have them here, does anybody have any questions for Joanne? Anything that happened today? Oh, I forgot. No, tell you what, I will give you the opportunity to unmute yourself, as people are probably starting to type away. So while we are still recording, for posterity's sake, if you have a question that might be valuable for anybody else to hear, now is the time to ask Joanne. We'll get that on the record. Last call, you have the ability to unmute yourself.
Everybody's shy today.
Well, Joe, I just want to thank you and your teachers. We were so, when you do these workshops.
Jennifer, that's you. Your mic is being special. Nope, not you.
Oh, I found it. So I think we do have a question coming in. I think they're going to go type it in. We had a mic issue on that. Yes, a copy of the PowerPoint. I will actually direct you to it because they've been wonderful to share everything ahead of time. I'll put it into the chat box right now. If you go to my professional learning page where I'm putting all of these, there is a section under there now that is toward the bottom. It's the latest edition, but it's under disciplinary literacy. And you'll see the presentation from yesterday about reading, writing, listening, and speaking in social studies. And then you're starting to see the build out for getting more bang for your buck. And the presentation and handouts are there. And as soon as the video is up, I will link Joanne's session in there as well. So all of the sessions that I've done and or will be doing all show up in there.
Okay. And Jennifer, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say how wonderful the participants have been today. So many times we do these sessions, especially virtually, and it's kind of like cricket. You know, you never know how it's going to go. And you guys were just giving constant feedback, so much so that it was hard even keeping up with all the great chats. So thank you so much for your participation today and your responsiveness. It was greatly appreciated. I know from us and especially from Joanne.
Yes, that's right. See, I told you she was kind. Yeah, wonderful.
Well, I would like to formally thank Joanne for today, for taking the lead today. I know we'll have Jennifer tomorrow and then Joy on Thursday. And again, I hope everybody felt like all of the bragging I did at the beginning about how awesome the Georgia DOE Social Studies team is. I hope all of that came through. It seems like everybody was very wonderful on that. So I'm going to go ahead and end our recording.